We have lost an icon in Guy Lafleur, and the last few days have been very emotional. A lot of tributes, a lot of great stories being told about him. It's been really great to see these stories being told about him and all this other stuff with Guy Lafleur. But at the same time, we know we are going to miss him very dearly. And he is someone who has meant so much to Canadiens fans in Montreal, in Quebec, and all over the hockey world. This is the last Hockey Inside Out episode before the end of the regular season, but it does not feel right to just make it about the Canadiens and the team on the ice. So instead, we are going to spend the entire episode discussing Guy Lafleur, his legacy, and some of his greatest moments. I'm Julian McKenzie, and welcome to Hockey Inside Out. I'm alongside Stu Cowan of the Montreal Gazette, Stanley Cup champion Rick Green, and a special guest is with us, another Stanley Cup champion. Welcome back to the show, Chris Knuckles Nilan. Thanks so much for taking the time to tap in and be a guest today, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to be here with yourself, Julian, Stu, and the guy who replaced me, Rick Green, the guy who used to just skate backwards all the time.
I told you I'd get even with you some way.
I'm glad we're able to, take some time to make some jokes at times like this, because we know these last few days have been very emotional. I got to see you both, Knuckles and Rick, at the Bell Center on the Sunday ahead of that game with the Canadiens and the Bruins, with the really stirring tribute before the game, the 10-minute ovation. Just one of the most incredible things I've ever got to witness live. But you guys know this, I wasn't around for Guy Lafleur's heyday, and I really wanted to ask a lot of the legends who were at the Canadiens game beforehand, the other guys like Gaston Gingras and Yvan Cournoyer and Bob Gainey and a host of others, just about the fact that there is a generation of fans who have not seen Guy Lafleur in his prime. They can only go back to archival footage or YouTube clips or any other ways to remember him, but at the same time, never truly experiencing it. And Knuckles, I got to ask you this question on Sunday, but I'll ask it for the purpose of the episode. How would you describe Guy Lafleur to somebody who never got to watch him play?
Well, I mean, I guess it's a little bit difficult. And I say that because, here was a guy who had such grace, flair, and dignity as a player on and off the ice. But, I guess when I think of, right, they called Hull the Golden Jet. He couldn't skate like Guy Lafleur. Guy Lafleur had this need for speed, not only off the ice, because he loved driving fast cars and he loved flying his helicopter, but on the ice, that's how he was. I mean, he flew, and le Dmon Blonds, the flower, his hair flying back from the breeze going through his hair because he was skating so fast in that era. He stuck out like a sore thumb on the ice, and it was incredible to be able to be a part of that, be a teammate of his, after having really grew up not liking him at all. Hate is a strong word. I hated the Canadiens, and I disliked Guy Lafleur.
That's exactly why you have all that Canadiens paraphernalia behind you, right?
Yeah, I have Guy's shirt hanging there, and that believe me, that quickly changed when I got up here and started to see what this organization, this province, and the people are all about.
Look, for me, let's just say every time Guy jumped over the boards to get on the ice, it was like, hold on, because he's bringing something. And everybody that had seen him play, I played with him and against him. He was dangerous when he's on the ice with his ability to accelerate and make things happen. And what a great player. That did so much for those winning teams back in the day, and everybody is come to realize how great a person he was also. But a real special guy, a guy that will obviously be really missed. And it was a really tough time for everybody to see this play out the way it did. But one of the best of all time to ever play for the Montreal Canadiens.
It's exciting, I guess, is the best word. I mean, he was those first two steps, right, guys? He was so quick when he got the puck, and he took off. And speaking with so many of his former teammates after his death, and talking with Steve Shutt, his longtime line mate, and Steve talked about how Guy he didn't know what he was going to do when he got the puck. He just played. He made it up as he went along, sort of. And he told Guy that one time. He told Shutt that one time. I get the puck, I just go. And Steve says, well, how is that supposed to help me? What am I supposed to do? And Guy said, well, that's your problem. But they managed to, they figured it out pretty well. And the thing is, people talk about Guy Lafleur as the goal scorer, but he was a great playmaker also. I mean, Shutt and him share the team record for 60 goals in a season. They did it one season after each other. So Guy set up Steve Shutt a lot of times also. Just exciting. And the thing also is, Yvon Cornway and talking with Steve also, and they said that the fact he was the biggest superstar in the NHL, but he never acted like it. And in the room, they were saying that was a key to the team. If Guy was the biggest superstar on the team and he just acted like a regular guy, well, everybody else had to act like that too. Nobody could have a big head in the room. And that's part of the reason why I think these guys, Knuckles and Rick and the guys who played with him, were so close. They became like brothers. And, interviewing Yvon Cornway on Sunday night, fighting back tears, it was heartbreaking to watch him, just how much Guy meant to them. And, Cornway was talking about, when Guy came in, his first 3 years were necessarily that great, but he was playing behind. Yvon Cornway was still the number one right winger. He wasn't on the power play. He wasn't on that. It was Yvon Cornway who convinced Guy to take off his helmet and become the Dmon Blonds with the hair flying behind him. And he basically told Guy, just keep playing the way you're playing. You're doing everything fine. You just need your opportunity, and your opportunity is going to come. And when his opportunity did come, well, 6 straight 50-goal seasons. But just exciting, I think, is the best way to describe Guy Lafleur.
Oh, I wasn't sure if Knuckles, you've.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, I think for kids today, I'm not sure they understand just how much pressure comes along with playing for this organization and having been brought up in this province. We've certainly seen the struggles of Jonathan Drouin, who has, I know when he came here, he said he'd be able to deal with the pressure and all that. It's extremely difficult. And you look at Lafleur when he came in, he had big shoes to fill. He was coming in 1971. You look at the pressure, and I say that he was drafted by them in 71. They just won a cup. Beliveau had just retired, certainly his hero, and he's coming in to basically fill that void, and to be in this hockey mad city and try and fill that void under the pressure of knowing, well, okay, this long lineage of players here, I got to continue to carry that torch, if you will. But, there were 2 other French Canadian players taken in that draft after him, which one might have been taken first overall. It was Marcel Dion. He ended up going to Detroit. And Marcel came out of the gate right away. He was putting the numbers up right away. Rick Martin with the Sabres, same thing. And Guy struggled those first couple of years. He wasn't putting those kind of numbers up those other guys were. So that, coupled with the immense pressure of replacing the great Jean Beliveau, it just really lends to the awe and the mystique of Guy Lafleur and what he did here.
And the thing with Guy too, I mean, his whole life he couldn't go anywhere without being stopped by people, right? I mean, Knuckles, I've been downtown Montreal with you, and I've seen it with you, with people stopping you, but with Guy it was 100 times, 1,000 times more. His whole life he was stopped. He couldn't have a meal. He couldn't go anywhere without people stopping for an autograph, a photograph, and he signed them all and he posed for all the photos. And I saw on Twitter somebody noted that we're seeing all these pictures of Guy with little kids or adults posing for photos, and he's happy, he's smiling in all of them. It's not like, oh man, I need to take another picture with somebody. He was just such a class act, and he dealt with the public so well. It's really remarkable when you think it's about not only the pressure on the ice, right, Knuckles, but off the ice.
Well, right to the end, he was that way. I got off the phone with Serge Savard last night. We had a talk, and he said, Guy, a lot of people don't know this. He went to Quebec City for 2 days when he was sick, and they honored him and all that. And he took pictures and signed autographs and did all that stuff. But the other thing was, we're raising money for cancer at the hospital that he was treated, and also Mrs. Savard was treated at. Mm-hmm. Well, all the people who gave, they all got a signed jersey. He signed every jersey, but called every person who gave, right to the end. I mean, here's a guy sick. He's dealing with his own mortality. And right to the end, he took the time to call each and every one of them people. And Serge told me that. Like the stuff he was telling me about Guy last night on the phone, it was like incredible. And he was that way right to the end. And, kudos to him, to be tugged and pulled out all the time. I got the opportunity to play with him in New York, and it was awesome. And I say that because I got to see him in a different environment. They didn't know. They were trying to sell him tickets on the way into the goddamn game.
Oh, my God.
And to get to see him kind of live a life, a different type of hockey life, it was so cool.
Well, you talk about the generation like you, Julian, who never saw him. My son's 21. He never saw Guy play. But when my son was about 5, I took him to a Canadiens old-timers game, and Guy played. And afterwards, my son got his autograph and a photo with him, and Guy couldn't have been nicer to him. And that's my son's memory of Guy Lafleur. You see just what a nice guy he was when he got a chance to meet him.
And of course, Knox, as we remember when he was coaching us with some of the alumni games, and we'd be in Timbuktu or, Fort McMurray with 250 people waiting, to get an autograph. Meanwhile, we would be sitting in the bus, and where would Guy be? He'd be back in the room waiting till each and every one of those people that were there got his signature, and he did it with a smile and just with, genuine heart of the kind of guy that he really was, and so well respected and liked.
Rick, I think the answer to this is no, and I'm sure you're going to say no too, but do you think the Canadiens could ever have anyone with the same amount of impact that Guy Lafleur had?
I don't see how that could happen. I mean, he played over 1,100 games with 1,353 points, I believe. Those kind of guys don't come around very often, and he was so good at what he did, and I wish I had an opportunity to play more with him than against him, because I know that he definitely helped destroy my plus minus, after playing against him. But
you had to make reference to that on today of all days.
What can I say? I made some of his replays for all the wrong reasons. But anyways, about Guy, this guy was just an exceptional person and player, and today's era with McDavid or Ovechkin, it's different. I mean, without taking anything away from those guys, I mean, you have to understand back in the days that those guys played, were scoring all those goals, there were a lot of guys that were hacking and chopping and grabbing and tackling to the point where, you could do that to slow the guy down, and he's still able to score. So, he found a way, obviously, to combat that and have success and fight his way through it to the point where he had just an incredible career, and just every game, every shift, he was bringing something, and the stats speak for itself.
I don't think there will be either, for many reasons. One is not only as great as Guy was, but as great as those teams were, those dynasty teams, 4 Stanley Cups in a row. That's unlikely to happen again. I mean, Tampa may be an exception to the rule with the salary cap and everything else. Imagine that team in the 70s with the Canadiens in today's world, what the salary cap would have been. There's no way you would have been able to keep those players together. It would have been too much. So players move around so much now. It's rare you see a guy play his entire career with the Canadiens, and even Guy didn't, right? I mean, Guy finished up with the Rangers and the Nordiques, but I don't think there'll ever be a player who attaches with the fans the way he did. And part of the reason, I think, and you guys will probably agree with this, is just the money factor. Like, Guy Lafleur was playing today, he'd be making $12 million a year, but the guys back then didn't make that kind of money. And I think that allowed them to relate more to the general public and the average guy. I I mean, one of the things with Guy, he seemed like just a regular guy when you met him. And all those guys, Dmon Blonds, all the guys from that generation, you meet them and they just seem as great as they were and as great as the teams they played on. There's a humbleness to them and just great guys. Like you wouldn't, if you didn't know who they were, if these guys walked into a room somewhere where they didn't know anything about hockey, you would just think they were regular guys. You wouldn't realize that they were the superstars that they were.
Yeah, no question about that. Guy's the type of guy, he could walk into a room in New Zealand and full of people and they say, who is that guy? I honestly, the charisma that took hold here in this city of Guy, the panache, if you will, of Guy Lafleur was incredible. Like, he was looked up to, revered and loved by everybody. And that's a position to be in. Like, you will never see it again when you think of the pillars of this organization in Rashad, Rocket, Howie Morentz, and Beliveau and Lafleur. Like, you're just never going to see it again. It's not going to happen. And I happen to think he's the last of the true great players. And you talk about Stu, but small town Thurso, small town values. He came here. He brought them with him, but he also grew and he became acclimated to this city and the pulse of this city and the pulse of the organization. And he was like that vein going into the heart. He was pumping blood through this city. Not many people can do that. I get it, Gretzky and Edmonton and all that, but it's a whole different thing here. This is a very emotional province that the people surely they have that passion and that love for the game, love for the Canadians, and Guy just he epitomized everything that this province and those fans and these people are all about.
Michael Farber had a great line on the radio the other day when he said, comparing Jean Beliveau and Guy, he said, Jean Beliveau was like your father and Guy was like your cool older brother. And Mike's the best at what he does. And I thought that was a perfect description to describe these two icons with the Canadiens.
And I really believe, I had obviously a taste to play in Washington, but coming into the Montreal Canadiens dressing room, and Guy and everybody else that was in that room was like one big family. And when we sat down and we looked at the guy beside us, first of all, knowing very well that what we're going to get from the guy each and every night, because we were close. And you put those kind of guys in the room, and Guy was a classic guy that would do anything for anybody at any time. And that spilled over to the point where everybody else basically had to follow suit. So what a great chance to experience something like that. And it's hard to put into words other than nothing but great memories.
And he was such a cool guy, right? He was just cool, Guy Lafleur. And Montreal was such a cool city back then in the 70s. And we had the Olympics and Crescent Street and Bishop Street, and the city was alive and flying. And he represented all of that, right? He represented everything this city was about. Bilingual, liked the nightlife, liked to have a good time, great hockey player, great with people. He was a great representation of what this city was during that time.
Knuckles, for this next one, I'd like to know, what are your memories of Lafleur from when he first retired from the Montreal Canadiens? And I'm not really as well versed on this part, but what does Jacques Lemaire have to do with how that all went down?
Oh, geez, it's a difficult one. And my memories obviously were the night we were heading 19 games into the season. And we were heading on the road, and Guy was driving me and Chris Chelios to the airport. And usually when we go to the airport, you pull into the long-term parking, and we're going on the road. And he pulled right up to the door of the Dorval Airport at the time. And we said, no, we'll go park in the lot. You don't have to drop us off. He said, no, I'm dropping you off because I'm not going. And we were like, what? We thought he was joking around. He said, no, I'm not going. He said, I've had it. And Yeah, that's it. So, listen, I know Jacques Lemaire may, obviously has something to do with this. He was the coach, right? But he's a coach coming in to try and establish some things. I remember when he first came in, I was late for a team breakfast in Boston, and he benched me. He sat me out of the game, didn't play me. So he's trying to get hold of this team, and what it needed was discipline. And I was a great example of that. And he certainly made an example of me. And I think in turn that helped the team. He explained to me afterwards what was going on. As far as Guy, I remember one night on the bench, there was about 2 minutes left in the game. Guy had just come off. So, chances are he ain't getting another shift. And when he come off, he took his tape off. And he rolled it up and threw it down the end of the bench. And, sure as hell, Jacques saw that. And the next line had changed. There was about a minute left. And he said, Lafleur, you're up. That line is up again. And Guy turned around and looked at him. The two of them looked at each other, and it wasn't good. Guy went out there and got his shin pad turned sideways. And I'm like, oh, he was so angry. Now, listen, Guy was a pond hockey player. And I say that because he was free. He was free to go and play the game, the way he played by feel. He played by, listen, top speed. I'm doing my thing. It was pond hockey for him in that rink. And Jacques came in. He tried to bring structure, which we needed as a team because we were all over the place. And he, that wasn't his game. And, it's kind of like Jacques didn't bend any for him and expected of him what he expected of everybody else. And he had a difficult time with it. And Jacques was in a really tough place. And, I know a lot of people blame him, but, there's a combination of things. Yeah, Guy was getting older. You're at that time in your career. And, yeah, he could still score. He could still do – he wasn't getting 50, but he could still put some numbers up. And, Jacques, I think unfairly at times gets a lot of the blame for that. But there was a combination of things here. And, it was difficult to watch. I remember that night getting out of the car, me and Shelley were like stunned heading to the plane. And, it was kind of stunning announcement. And, we were shocked.
Knuckles, is it true that you gave Red Fisher the scoop that Lafleur is retiring?
Yeah, basically, we were hanging around outside the airport, outside the gate waiting to go. And, everybody asked where he was. So, it wasn't like, and I remember Lemaire said, wonder where he was. And, did anybody see him? And I said, yeah, I mean, he dropped me and Shelley off and he just said he wasn't coming on the trip. And Red was, sniffing around like he always sniffed around. And, he come up to me and asked me, so what's going on? I said, he's just not coming on the trip. I don't know. He said, do you think he's ever going to play again? Is he retiring? I said, listen, I don't know, but it didn't sound good. So Red, he took some risk and certainly had the scoop of his retirement, and he got it from me. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we were able to clear that up. Rick, do you have any other thoughts, and Stu as well? You can hop on thoughts on how that all went down.
Well, I think the root of the problem with the relationship that they had was Lemaire was trying to change the kind of player that Lafleur was. And, I can remember back one of the practices, and Jacques was very structured. Everybody had to follow the program as Nux and all of us know, coming from the Bob Berry regime. And, the Flower he wanted to play. He wanted to go. And when he saw open ice, he wanted to take off. So one of the drills that we were doing was in a transition type drill, and Flower was already taken off, and Lemaire had said, get to the boards for an out, and Lemaire was already, out of the zone, and he skated back to Lemaire, and he looked at Lemaire in the eyes, and his eyes were telling him basically, you are not going to change me as a player. And I think from, a number of occasions as moving forward over the course of that short period, the relationship seemed to go just downhill to the point where it wasn't fun for Guy anymore. He wasn't prepared to play that kind of game, and unfortunately, he didn't win that one, and it was just a matter of time before he had moved on.
Well, I remember, as Knuckles saying, Red had that scoop about Lafleur retiring, and he took a lot of heat the morning the Gazette came out, especially from the French media, saying it was impossible. There's no way Guy Lafleur was going to retire. But one of Red's things was Red never dealt in rumors. What he wrote, that's true. He knew what was going on, and another case of that right there with Red getting the scoop on that. But with the Lemaire thing, it's so difficult when any business, if you go from being friends with everybody and then all of a sudden you're the boss. A little bit of a similar experience I had when I became sports editor at the Gazette for the period there. You go from being one of the guys to being the boss, and the whole dynamic, everything changes, right? Now you're the boss. And with Lemaire and Lafleur, that situation where now Lemaire's in charge, and they were great friends before, right? They were line mates, and now he's in charge, and he's trying to put as Knuckles said, trying to put in his system, and you can't play favorites, right? You have to treat everybody the same, or you're going to lose respect as a coach. So Jacques was in a difficult position, and it's sad. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, Knuckles, but I don't think Jacques and Guy spoke after he left the Canadiens. Their friendship sort of ended, and it's very similar when you look at what happened to Mario Tremblay and Patrick Roy. I mean, they were like roommates and friends, but when you go from being a friend to being the boss, it's a tough situation. And that was what it was there. And Jacques was trying to do what he thought was best for the team. And Guy didn't agree with him. He thought he was still best for the team, as Knuckles said, playing pond hockey and just doing his thing. But that's not the game was changing also, right, Knuckles? I mean, Jacques' system worked. He won Stanley Cups in New Jersey. It wasn't the most exciting thing to watch, but the ideas and the coaching plan he had worked. But it's just sad that it happened that way, and it's too bad that a friendship and a relationship. But as I said, it was a similar thing with Mario Tremblay and Patrick Roy, but they didn't see eye to eye.
Well, they have since apparently they've smoothed things over, but Patrick and Mario, which I'm so happy to see, because honestly, we'd all love to keep a stranglehold on our youth, right? But that doesn't happen. We all get older, and the same in the game, right? And Guy was getting up there. And, often when we're in a situation life is all relationships, and all it is, with our dog, with our mailman, with our significant other, with our kids, with our friends, with our boss, it's all relationships. And sometimes we have issues and we have problems in those relationships. And it's so important, I think. And it pained me to see that these two guys never were able to put that behind them. And, I think you got to get honest with yourself in situations like that and realize what your part in that is. It's easy to point at the other guy and say, oh, he did this, he did that. But take a look at your part in it. And they were never able to do that. And they were never able to get by that. And it was sad. It was sad to, here's two guys that had so much success together as players. And, Lemaire, fed him the puck so many nights to have those 50-goal seasons. And Guy, the opposite with Lemaire. And Lemaire took care of their end of the rink, playing with Steve Shutt and Flower. I mean, come on, you got to be able to take care of your own end of the rink as a sentiment. So, again, that relationship was never healed, and it's a shame that it never did, quite frankly. And it's a sad part of the whole saga, and you wish you could, because Jacques, I love Jacques Lemaire. I love him. He was my favorite coach, and I certainly love Guy. And it was hard to watch. They could never put that behind them.
Well, Knuckles, I know the other with you and Serge Savard, right? When Serge had to trade you.
Right.
But you guys are still remain great friends, right?
Yeah, I mean, I knew my part in that, and I did have a part in it. But I stayed true to myself, and it cost me. It almost broke me, but it cost me in a big way. I never wanted to play for another team. I've always said that. I always will. I never ever wanted to play for another NHL team than the Montreal Canadiens after I got here, and I ended up having to do that, and it was never quite the same for me. Just wasn't.
Speaking of playing for different teams, we did kind of mention that, yes, Guy Lafleur, we know, spent the bulk of his career with the Canadiens, but he did spend time with Les Nordiques and also with the Rangers. Knuckles, I'd like to know, you mentioned you did get to see him in New York. What were your memories of seeing him play with the Blue Shirts?
Well, it's funny. Phil Esposito, Phil was, I don't know, he had this thing that Broadway, he wanted marquee names, and, he brought in Marcel Dion, and Marcel was older, right? Guy's retired 3 years. Phil you just general managers today just would never doing it, right? It's like, no, Bergevin brought in Stahl there last year because big sentiment, maybe can help playoffs experience, all that. But Phil came to me, he said, hey, Knuckles, can Lafleur, if I signed him, could he score 20 goals? And yeah, for sure he could score 20, given the ice time. And Michel Bergeron was a coach, the Petit Tiger and the Petit Tig, and he was going to get the ice time. And sure enough, Guy came into New York and he scored 18. I think he missed 13 games or 14 games, something like that. And I'm sure if he played the full 80, he would have got to 20 goals. But yeah, the impact, it was awesome to see because I obviously played with him, close to him. He had a good friendship, and he came into New York, and all these guys were like, just their eyes lit up. Man, the great Guy Lafleur is walking in the room, dressed to a T, just looking sharp, and he comes in, and guys were just in awe of him, in awe of what he'd done. And then when he got out there and started interacting with everybody, they were like, "This guy, how cool is this?" He's a regular guy. And I always say that because, superstars on a different level, and sometimes there's an aloofness to them. And it's hard to have a connection with him. Guy never, in my own situation, and I saw him in a lot of situations where, and I can speak of my own, is that he never treated me less than. He never treated me like I'm, he always made sure that, in my case, that, I was invited, I was part of. And in New York, he did that with a lot of guys. They couldn't believe it. And he was a great teammate there, guy. I mean, Brian Leach, Tony Granato were coming in. They were two rookies coming in, vying for the Rookie of the Year that year. And here they are playing with Guy, and they were in awe of him. And he has two certainly great players, and Brian Leach, a Hall of Famer. But yeah, Guy it was fun to watch and fun to be a part of because I got to see him, like I said earlier, away from all this chaos, away from the rink. And guys couldn't believe it, that he was still able to turn it on. Like after being out 3 years, the speed and the ability he still had, guys were pretty in awe of that.
Well, I still remember that first game when he came back and played at the Forum. It was so weird seeing him in that Rangers jersey and watching some of the highlights. Rick, he scored 2 goals, and I think one of them he split the defense. And
yeah, it was Sabota's fault on that one.
Oh my God!
The other guy
pointed the finger. I had my man.
Oh my God, Rick, do you have a favorite Guy Lafleur off ice moment?
Yeah, actually.
Do you have a favorite off ice moment that you're able to tell on this podcast? Yeah. That's how I should have phrased the question.
Actually, a testament to Guy, the type of guy he was. Anyways, training camp, I think it was 1983, had broken his toe. So he wasn't in camp. So he found something else to do and he decided to go hunting. So he went hunting out of season, shot himself a deer, and Guess what was on the front page of the Journal de Montréal was Guy with his rifle over top of this deer. It ended up triggering, obviously, hey, you're not supposed to do that at this time of year, blah, blah, blah. So we're sitting on the plane. He goes, he says, I got this really, really nice deer, but I'm really in trouble because somebody's coming to my house to get all the steaks that I cut up in the head. And I said, oh, that's too bad. I said, what are you going to do with the head? He said, well, it's already mounted. And he says, do you want it? Because I had a summer place. And I said, well, yeah, just tell me how much I owe you, and I'll take it from you. So he said, next day in the parking lot, I'll meet you there. I ended up going to the parking lot. He had the thing mounted perfectly. And I said, how much? And in true Guy fashion said, don't worry about it. Just take it. You're doing me a favor by, getting that out of my household. But that's really the only real story that I can share with everybody on, Guy Lafleur, but just showing the kind of guy that he was and giving in kind.
Knuckles, what about you?
Well, I have a whole lot of them.
I know you do. Can you give us one that I know we could have on the podcast?
Well, he invited me on quite a few occasions to fly with him. Okay. And I had the opportunity. He called me one day. Hey, you want to go to Quebec City with me? I have to pick up a car and look at a car. And okay, so we flew there. We were both doing an autograph session in Boston. We flew down in the morning, and we flew back that same day. And it was just awesome to be with him.
Right, Knuckles?
What's that?
He was on his helicopter, right?
Yeah. And then his hometown, Thurso, when they were honoring him and putting that big statue in Thurso in town square, he called me and said, I want you there. And I'm on the helicopter. All the guys there are Hall of Famers. And here I am, this kid from Boston who was a slug, average player, Here I am with all these guys invited to his hometown. And for me, it was really it was a touching moment for me, because to be invited there by him, and he wanted me there. And that's what I said about him never treating me less than. But I got to say, one of the funniest moments, back in the day, he had this big stereo system he was selling, huge speakers and everything, really beautiful. And he ended up giving me that stereo system my first year, and I gave it to my dad. It's still in the house. My father never uses it, but it's like a trophy. Well, God rest his soul, my dad. But he never used it in the latter years, and it stayed there as because it was Guy gave it to him, and it was like a trophy. And I remember we were here at an establishment one afternoon, and we were staying out rather long, and Guy was there, and my dad was there, and my dad was brought in, like everybody was treating my dad like one of the boys. It was so awesome. Today they go on dad trips, they have one every year, which I think is awesome. I only wish we could have done that. But my dad popped up in a few places when we were in LA and all that. Anyway, we're at this establishment one afternoon, and, they found out my dad was a Green Beret and blah, blah, blah. My dad was a trained killer, my dad. And Guy is, you're not that tough. I'm sure you're not as tough as Chris. Are you, Henry? And my father said, yeah, not really, And so Guy said, do you think you're strong? You're strong, Henry? And how strong are you? My father grabbed Guy and put him up on his shoulders. He had him up on his shoulders. And we're in this place, and everybody's looking at my dad has flour up on his shoulders. Like, it was unbelievable. And I'll never forget that moment. We laughed. So, Rick, were you there that night? Henry put him up. Oh, it was classic. But just those moments, I was out with him one night in Edmonton early on. After the game we had won, and he introduced me to this horrible drink, cognac and amaretto.
Oh,
right now he said, "Hey, here you go, kid." I had I don't know how many I had, but I don't remember a thing. And what happened? I was in my own room. It was my first year, And I didn't have a roommate because I was the odd guy. Next thing I know, Rod Langway, you weren't here yet, Greeny. Rod Langway's pushing me, Yankee, get up, wake up, you're late. And I slept in my suit. I ran downstairs, I grabbed my bag, and Claude Ruel was sitting on the front of the bus, right? And I stepped up the first stair, the second stair, and I start to turn, and Flower gets up, starts clapping, and the whole bus, I'm telling you, I thought I was a goner. I thought I was done. And yeah, so moments like that I'll remember. But I never drank cognac and amaretto again. Thank you.
Duly noted. Stu.
I love this story, not because you picking Guy and Lemaire and Lupe up in front of the Boston Garden year after you got drafted, and they didn't know who the hell you were.
Yeah, it was funny. You know, I was with a friend of mine, Franny Flaherty. We pulled up. We saw them. They were waiting for a cab. We offered them a ride. They kind of looked at each other like, are we going to get in? I mean, chances are looks like we could get robbed here, not only of our money, but our Stanley Cup rings. They took a risk and they got in. And, you know, I told them, I said, you know, I'm going to be playing with you guys next year up there. And Lemaire says, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, I play hockey here at Northeastern. I was drafted by you guys. And Guy said, oh, yeah, you were drafted. What round? And I said, I was all proud and I said, 17th, you know. And the three of them started cracking up, laughing, like saying, this kid, he has no chance in the world, you know. And sure enough, I was here first day of training camp. I was in the room with Guy. We're on the same team. And he looked at me and kept staring at me. And he finally said, Tabanak, it's you, huh? It's you, the kid from Boston. I said, yeah, I told you I was going to be here. And I'll never forget it. Quite a memory.
I love that story, and plus the fact you guys became such great friends too, Knuckles. I mean, my favorite memory overall is just watching Guy interact with the fans, and as I mentioned, my son when he was 5 years old. But my favorite personal memory, I showed up one year at the Bell Center to cover the Guy Lafleur Awards that were given to kids who best combine academics and school, and I got there early. And Guy was already there, and I've learned from speaking with a lot of his friends and teammates that he was early to most of the stuff he went to. So it was just him and I, and he was sitting at the bar, and he looked like $1 million. He had on this really nice suit, sort of like Knuckles looked the other night there at the Bell Center, really snazzy looking with the blue suit and everything else. He was all tanned, and I went up and I said, Guy, you look like a friggin' movie star. You look like $1 million there. Oh, merci. I said, I guess you got the tan playing golf. No, I effing hate golf. I said, well, how'd you get the tan? He says, painting my house. And I remember thinking, like, can you imagine like a superstar athlete today painting his house? But that was Guy, and I'll never forget that moment. He said, I was painting my house. So he hated golf, but he was out painting his house, and he did. He looked like $1 million. He looked like a movie star. He was, I'll never forget that, just thinking to myself afterwards, Guy Lafleur painting his own house. Like, wow.
But he also hated to cut grass, so he put AstroTurf in his yard, so he didn't have to cut it.
Is that true?
What the hell?
Yeah. Smart guy.
Do that?
Here's a story.
Yeah,
my neighbor just recently, Sylvain Lalonde, my neighbor, I fished with him quite a bit, and we're out fishing the Lake of Two Mountains, and he just adored Guy Lafleur growing up, and you know, like every other kid in this province. And you know, we were out there fishing. I go, you know, Guy lives right over there, Il Bazard, right there on the point. He said, really? No way. Really? I said, yeah, right there. He's on the point. So he goes, oh, I would love to meet this guy one day. And so I pulled out my phone. I said, hey, call Guy, and picked up. I said, hey, Guy, it's Knuckles. Hey, Chris, what's up? I said, listen, I'm just off your house here. I'm fishing with my neighbor, Sylvain, and he's such a big fan. You know, we stop by maybe and say hello. He said, yeah, come. So we pull in the boat, and we throw the rope to him, you know, a little 18-foot fishing boat. And he pulled us in, and Sylvain went up there and talked to him, you know, for a half hour, going back and forth. And he gave him that time. It was unbelievable. I took pictures of them, and this was the day before he was getting his diagnosis. You know, he had already had the surgery, and he was getting the diagnosis that next day. So he got all this stuff going on, which at the time I wasn't aware about this whole thing. of him and his condition. I knew he had the heart thing, but the cancer thing, no.
Right.
And he was going to find out the next day. It was a Sunday. It was a beautiful day, and he took the time to spend with Sylvain. It made his day, and that's the type of guy he was. He was just an awesome guy like that. He had time for everybody. It was so cool.
I think that's a really great way to kind of end off our show for today. Just a man who has made, look, just hearing all these stories about Guy, just making us all laugh, but also knowing his impact on so many people. I think your last story, Knuckles, really was a good sign of that. Rick, Stu, as always, I really appreciate you being on these shows every week. Knuckles, it was really great to have you back on Hockey Inside Out. I know you have your own podcast that you're trying to start. Can you tell us about it? Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Yeah. It's called the Raw Knuckles Podcast. We're going to put it out on April 30th. It's going to be on Spotify, iTunes, and countless other sites. First episode of Raw Knuckles is Chris Chelios. But yesterday, I taped about an hour and 15 minutes straight of myself making a tribute episode to Guy Lafleur. So if you get a chance, make sure you go on the Raw Knuckles Podcast, Spotify, iTunes. It'll be worth listening to because you heard a little bit of the stories today, but for an hour and 15, that's all I did is talk about Guy Lafleur and our relationship, just me and Guy. And it's pretty cool.
Can't wait for that, and can't wait for you and Chelios, Knuckles. That'll be
that's going to be fun.
It's a good one.
That's going to be fun. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for this week's edition. We really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed to the show, and subscribe to the show on YouTube if you can. Subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter and visit hockeyinsideout.com for more fun episodes and other articles around the Montreal Canadiens, which we will talk about in the bonus episodes to come after today. But in the meantime, this has just been this entire episode. This is one of the best episodes I think we've ever done. And Guy Lafleur, even for my generation, a generation that didn't get to see him in his heyday, he will be sorely missed. And there will be no one quite like Guy Lafleur. Nobody.